Hello, good evening, and welcome to this demo at Montfort event brought to you by Montfort University's Innovation Centre. My name's Andrew Reeves. I'm a senior lecturer in the Institute of Energy and Sustainable Development at DMU. And this evening, we've got three speakers all looking at different issues about sustainable transport in Leicester. So we've got Robin Pointon from Go Travel Solutions, and he'll be looking at the future of sustainable travel and how that might pan out in Leicester. We've got the Deputy City Mayor, Councillor Adam Clarke, and he'll be looking at some of the strategies that are happening already and are coming in the near future to promote sustainable transport in Leicester. And I've also got Jack Holland from Ride On, who is working on the new electric bike hire scheme that will be on our, well, it's on our streets already, but it'll be live and operational soon in Leicester, which is very exciting. It's a 1 hour session. So each speaker will have about 15 minutes. They'll speak for about 10 minutes. We'll have about 5 minutes for questions. And then we'll have about 10 minutes at the end for further questions that we can put to all of the speakers. As you can see, there's a chat window available. Use that to put your questions during the session, and then we'll feed those to the speakers either just after they've spoken or at the end of the session. Apologies in advance if you have a good question that we don't get time for. It is quite a short event. I think that's about all to say. So we'll crack on with the first speaker. So Robin Pointon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. If you can have the first slide up, please. So yeah, just want to do a bit of scene setting here and think a bit about future mobility. Where next? Given where we are, there's all sorts of possibilities in the ways it may go. And a little bit of background first of all. Next slide, please. So just a bit of background about ourselves. In kind of normal times, we have an office around the corner from Montfort University at Fry's Mill. We used to be a tenant at the Innovation Centre for a number of years. My name is Robin Pointon. I'm the MD and founder of Go Travel Solutions. We're a social enterprise, and our work is very much about the very practical things that we can do around sustainable travel solutions for communities and workplaces. And there's a bit of information about the principles that we seek to work by. Next slide, please. Just in terms of the work we do, this is kind of a flavour of the kind of work that we're doing. We're doing a lot of work in and around Leicester at the moment. Just down from Montfort University, the University Hospitals of Leicester, that they've got a big reconfiguration programme at the minute. That in itself will generate lots of questions and challenges around travel going forwards. So we're working very closely with the hospitals around that scheme and how that looks in the future. We're also very involved in a new housing scheme, which has been built over the last 3-4 years called New Loversthorpe. Some of you may have seen the Arriva Click buses, and we've been heavily involved in that, in helping to establish that service on behalf of the landowners, the Drummond estate. But we get involved in other things as well. Some of you might have heard of a scheme called SmartGo. The university itself is a member. This is a scheme for workplaces to support sustainable transport, and a scheme called Local Go as well, which does a similar job, as it were, for local people in communities, such as new housing schemes. Next slide, please. Just a flavour of the work we do. We're very much at the coalface when it comes to travel and transport and sustainability. So in the logo fest that you see before your eyes, you'll see various logos for employers that we work with, transport authorities, both at a local level but also at national level, a range of developers that's been growing over the last few years. And then we work a lot with transport providers and seek to knit together their offer and translate that into something which works, for employers and for local communities. Next slide, please. Well, probably more than ever, the opportunity to reset travel and transport is there before our eyes. And many of you probably, know the arguments really around sustainable transport well. And probably we would sum numbers up into cover 3 areas. It's really important because it's about transport is about providing access and mobility for all, not just for an exclusive group. And that's what sustainable transport always seeks to do. It also helps and supports health and well-being in many different ways, about encouraging activity as part of your daily life. And also it's crucial in terms of the challenge around climate, the climate emergency, and helping to reduce footprint. And one of the things that got us very excited 10 months ago, it seems a lot longer now, Department of Transport came out with this paper around decarbonising transport. And in there was a statement from the Secretary of State for Transport that you'll see there on your screen. And those were the very words in there. And that was the ambition then. Obviously, things certainly at the minute are on hold in that respect, but we would certainly very much subscribe to that same view. And the work we do is very much focused to trying to achieve that end. So there is definitely an opportunity to reset. And yeah, next slide, please. And I don't know if people may have seen this. It's not there now, I don't believe, but just say around about less than about half a mile from the Montfort University, this is was some graffiti, street art on the side of the what was where Filbert Street, the football ground was, which I saw when I was on my bike one day, and it very much sort of sums up certainly my feelings and the feelings of our enterprise, and on the back of the pandemic, really. If try to make the most of this opportunity to reset and try to develop new, more positive norms going forward, because in so many ways, not just travel and transport, but things have not been working, and the opportunity to say do better was definitely there. Next slide, please. So we are very much faced with both, in both places, both a crisis and an opportunity. We undertook some survey work back in May last year, 800 commuters across the country from 49 employers. And this was reflecting the question that they were asked was, what do they see as being their travel habits post-pandemic? Now, when we surveyed in May 2020, I don't believe people were expecting to be still in the similar situation back in January 2021. But that was certainly the desire of people. Post-pandemic was to make changes in how they travel, but also challenging and concerning. This was a survey in the back end of last year, around November. There's a survey the RAC did of their members. It may be fairly difficult to read in detail, but we'll be sharing these slides after. But they reflected some of the appetite or the desire to use cars increasing year on year between 2019 and 2020 because of the pandemic. Many of them probably for understandable reasons in terms of looking at social distancing and the like, but worrying trends really because, say, car dependency and growing car dependency and sustainable transport obviously do not go hand in hand. Next slide, please. And so thinking about public transport, this is some Move It data. So this is worldwide data. And the UK has been very much, following very similar trends when the pandemic and the lockdown started back in March last year. A massive drop in activities around the use of public transport. That's kind of climbed, and more recently, it's also then reduced again with the further restrictions as we've entered into 2021. And roughly at the moment in the UK, public transport is running around about 25% of the levels that it was at prior to the start of the lockdown back in March 2020. Next slide, please. In these final few minutes, I just want to pose some questions, really. It is very difficult to predict the future, and it's very much probably as much as any time down to policymakers and funders to really start to shape. And ultimately, it comes down to us as members of the public in terms of deciding what kind of future do we want. But certainly one thing there's an opportunity to do here is to reset public transport. We certainly see that in the plans for the city in Leicester going forward with the electrification of some of the bus network. And there's certainly no doubt as well, both for rail and bus, that in many ways, what was there before wasn't working. So an opportunity really to grab hold of that opportunity and to reset is there. One trend that we expect to see, just going back to the previous slide, please. Thank you. One trend that we expect to see is a rise. That rise in telecommuting is here to stay. I think the best forecasts and the research at the minute are indicating that post-pandemic there might be a change of up to 10% in the commute in terms of reduction, just through less people commuting to and from the workplace, and that in itself can be a real positive. And itself also might help in terms of the public transport opportunity by flattening the demand over the course of a day. And also another, what we see, I think another opportunity is that there's going to be more convergence between different mobility platforms and choices. And an example of this, and this is just more at this stage speculation, but why do we separate out so much at this now people and parcel delivery? If you go on to the next slide, please. On your left is a picture of a vehicle. That's the Arriva Click service that operates. I mentioned earlier that's, funded by the Drummond Estate. It serves a large part of Leicester, including the new Lubbock development, and you've got a DPD vehicle. But in many ways, there's not a lot of difference there. And maybe one of the opportunities for the future will be about how those opportunities can merge. Fundamentally, it's using vehicles. It's using very similar telematics as well and algorithms to maximize deliveries. There's lots of practical barriers to overcome, but I could see certainly that this may be an opportunity, certainly in rural areas where there's real transport poverty, to actually take hold and grab hold of that opportunity to provide more public transport opportunities for people. Many years ago, and there are still some remnants of this, there were post buses in rural areas which did very much that same thing. So many ways not a new idea, but maybe an opportunity now, say with the software and the development that's possible, that actually could grab hold of that. Next slide, please. And some further thoughts. It's great that on this webinar tonight, we've got, the new Santander Cycles Leicester scheme and more information coming from Ride on this. And we see that sustainable transport becoming part of the public realm is something that has been happening over the last few years. And I think increasingly will be. It needs to be a default in a setting that all urban areas can provide, so that there is that public transport, be it cycles, available. I think it's also key to remember that technology will not provide us with all the answers. In fact, at times it provides some of the challenges. It creates problems as well as solutions. And so it's an example being like EV charging, where the demand for EV charging, could at times, it makes it very difficult to provide a mix of sustainable transport solutions in some places. And the final point I'd just like to leave with really is that it is very much a tipping point at the moment in terms of for transport policy and also for funding as well. In many ways, we can decide, well, what future do we want? What really does matter? Because the policy and the funding need to follow that. We have a great opportunity to shape something better on the back of very challenging situations going forward. So I'd like to leave it there. The final slide's just got my contact details on there. Very happy to be contacted outside of this, but hopefully that just helped to set the scene really today, and the thoughts that we're going to hear, from Jack from Ride On, and from Councillor Adam Clarke from the City Council. So many thanks. Bye.
That's great. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Robin, for that introduction. That gives us a really nice context, I think, of the different modes of transport and the trends. Some which seem quite positive. If you think about the big take-up of cycling we've seen over the last year, and some which seem really challenging, as you're saying. So many people who were using public transport, obviously travelling a lot less, but also becoming very dependent upon cars. And certainly from my teaching and research, that once a habit is formed, it can be quite difficult to break. And so I do wonder what will happen with people who've taken to the car much more over the past year, and how that could be shifted. I wondered if you might expand a little around, you said, it's a kind of a turning point maybe for public transport, and certainly, as you're saying, with more teleworking, those kind of investments in public transport could be a lot harder, and certainly in terms of efficiency of getting as many people using it as possible. There's issues there. Obviously, we need it, in terms of inclusivity and people having access to get around. But what do you see as the direction for public transport? Where could it go positively?
I think probably in two ways. I mean, I think we are seeing on the railways that there is increasingly state control, so it's not quite nationalised, but where it's going now, it's going to more of an integrated package. So, the franchise model in some ways is dead, which I think actually has got positives. I mean, we've got examples where, ticketing and other parts of it are just a bit of a nonsense. So I think there is, certainly from a kind of policy level, some helpful direction of travels there. Just bear me a second. I think what is really up for grabs really is from the political level, in terms of, well, how do we want to shape that? I think operators, thinking I'm been involved in the bus industry in the past, and I think it's very difficult for the operators themselves really to make a massive change. I think there is waiting for a new policy statement around what the bus strategy is going to look like going forward, and I do think it's now more than ever political input both at local and national level is key, really, because that will set the direction of travel. But it does, like with all political things, it needs them to feel actually this is where the will of the people are. And I think we're in a bit of a, we've got extremes of views at the moment, really, on the back of the pandemic, which is really making people think, just so weary. I just want to get back and often get back to what I was doing. And then there's also those that have got an appetite to say, let's really make this a massive change. So it's real tricky, but I never think there's ever been any time more open. And like I said, public transport in the form it's been, there's some fundamental structural weaknesses there as well. And we since 1986, we've run public transport based on, our bus services on the basis that it's public transport, but effectively it's been in private hands. And this is not making a political statements, but I think we've recognised that, that mix and the blend is not as good as it could be.
Okay, thank you. We'll have one more question before we go on to Adam. I think maybe my colleague Tammy can pop it on the screen. That's from Keith Kelly. Okay, and actually Keith had two questions, so I'll make it a double whammy. So there's a question around public transport and the shift to cars, and also on the counterpoint, if shared mobility, so essentially shared car use, which could be through a car club, how can that be a more attractive alternative?
Certainly, I mean, we're big fans of car clubs, and I say we know Keith as well. So, and we're very keen to introduce one into one of the schemes we're involved in as soon as possible. That in itself has just during the pandemic, it's got some challenges because I say car club use for some providers is more limited because of just to put in sort of in buffers between the hires. So you just can't get the utilisation out of the cars at the minute in the same way. But certainly we're very keen to sort of look at introducing those because there's no one silver bullet when it comes to sustainable transport. It is very much about providing a blend of different solutions for individuals. To recognise the fact is that we live, as I say, very different lives and complicated lives with different journeys.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, just to add to that, having been part of a small car club ever since I've lived in Leicester, and I've not owned a car in my life, and taking away the fact that you own a car means it's not your default for your journeys, and then you only do it when you need to. So going back to one of your graphs around people need a car to move stuff, in those scenarios, you only use the car when you need it, and otherwise on a local level, you could be using a bike trailer or other modes of transport potentially. I'll be using my chair's position there to throw in thoughts. Okay, so there was a few more questions come in. We're going to come back to those at the end, time permitting, but I want to keep us to time and introduce Adam Clarke next. So thanks, Robin, so far, and we'll hear from you again at the end. So over to Adam, talking about policy from the City Council's perspective. Over to you, Adam. I think you're muted at the moment.
You can hear me now, can you? Great.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Great. I think I've got some slides to share. Good evening, everybody. Very, very pleased to be here this evening. Especially great to hear Robin. And, I know Robin very well, and we know Robin very well at Leicester City Council, and really do value the work of him and his organisation. who provide excellent data and research for us, and really good insight. We're very lucky to have to have Robin and his organisation in the city. Can we share slides now, please? So later on this evening, you're going to hear much more about the bike share scheme that we are currently rolling out slowly but surely into the city of Leicester. So I don't want to dwell too much on bike share. Just to say really that a couple of years ago we asked ourselves the question: can a city that sees cycling as critical to the future of mobility, a city that is so compact, a city that's got 3 hospitals, that's got 2 universities, a thriving multi-campus FE college, and all those employment areas, and the need for growth, and the relentless nature of growth we're expecting, can it claim to be a cycling city without having at least attempted bike share? And that was really the inquiry question we asked ourselves. We looked at the way the city was going. We knew cycling was part of the answer, and we were sure that bike share was part of that solution at that point. And really, that's what's taken us to where we are today, on the brink of launching bike share in Leicester. Next slide, please. So we are a city that embraces the bike. You can see it moving around Leicester. You can see the kilometres of fixed infrastructure that has gone in over the years as part of our Connecting Leicester programme. We have been recognised around the country and internationally, actually, for the work that we've been doing, creating space, giving over space to the bicycle. And the interventions that we've made have demonstrated that they do lead to growth. So giving the space to the bike does encourage people to cycle in and of itself. And I think with high quality infrastructure, you do invite people to choose the bicycle. Next slide, please. But we've also seen recently an opportunity, or actually a need, to introduce infrastructure that isn't fixed, infrastructure that is by its nature temporary to meet an emergency. And we were the first city in the country to introduce a pop-up cycle lane, the key worker corridor that runs to the Leicester Royal Infirmary. And that really was the beginning of our COVID-19 emergency recovery plan. Now, we expected that recovery to be a lot quicker than it has been. But what we were able to demonstrate was, through introducing key worker corridors, that we were able to enable people in the time of emergency to get to where they need to be, especially when public transport, mass transit as it were, was unavailable in its entirety because of social distancing. In fact, it was completely unavailable at the beginning of the pandemic, and then there was limited capacity on buses in the city from that point. So the pop-up cycle lanes have been absolutely essential to the response to the pandemic. But what they've also done is enabled us to mark out cycle lanes where we know that there is a need for cycling infrastructure in the future, for fixed cycling infrastructure in the future. Indeed, some of our pop-up lanes were already funded for fixed infrastructure going forward, and they've helped us to learn in our response to the COVID-19 emergency. Next slide, please. Now, that necessity, and you can see there, has helped to connect the wider network. So this is our tube map that we developed to support new, returning, and indeed frequent cyclists to better understand the developing network and how the pop-up cycle lanes have connected to the fixed infrastructure, historic and newer fixed infrastructure in the city. And that's been an incredibly important piece of work that we've been able to do only because of COVID-19, only because we've been able to make an emergency response and develop something that is really now recognised within the within the DNA of the city. We have a cycling infrastructure there that is available to all, something safe, something that is recognised as being of quality and meeting need as well. And that's something that we've really felt has enabled us to accelerate some of the thinking that we were having already, whilst at the same time enabling people to socially distance and protect themselves from the pandemic. Next slide, please. But above that, there is a bigger strategy that's been emerging over the last few years. What you can see here on this on this infographic is growth areas where we know that we're going to need to grow, whether it be employment growth or housing growth in the city, and therefore to consider what the impacts on the transport network are going to be. So you can see the potential for park and ride sites, the pink blobs there, some already existing, some potentially may come forward in the future, very high level helicopter level thinking. And you can also see the red circle there, which is a short bike ride, a 10-minute bike ride, and the outer purple circle, which is more of a 30-minute public transport journey. And really recognising then what sort of interventions might be required going forward using the existing corridors. Next slide, please. So part of that journey has to be through the electrification of buses, as Robin pointed out earlier, and the electrification of park and ride has come forward, again, because us as a city have intervened. It's the public sector that's intervened on where we have most control in terms of bus, and that is park and ride. We co-own the park and ride and bring in Roberts, who are the current contract holder, to deliver the park and ride. So we were able, through the funding opportunity of transforming cities, to bring funding in to bring electric buses into Leicester to serve our park and ride network. Now, what that's enabled us to do, we hope, is to lead by example, and that will push on the major bus operators who have their own services, who have been working very hard themselves to improve their fleet over the years, and their fleet has become much less polluting, but we want them to take the next step now. We hope that this kind of signals to them that maybe they will up their game and start to electrify their fleets as well. And what you can see there are the green Yutong buses that we will be receiving within the city very soon, and our park and ride network, which will also be expanding, will be fully electrified by, we hope, the end of the year. Next slide, please. We've also delivered St Margaret's, or brought in funding for St Margaret's bus station to deliver what we think is the UK's first zero carbon building, again with electric charging points for buses too. So that will enable those electric buses that we're on the Reeves and the firsts of this world, and the centre buses of this world to move over to. But also the building itself will be zero emissions and incredibly high quality design. I hope you agree, and that's on site being constructed at the moment. Next slide, please. One of the challenges is of course, you know, with great ideas, we've been able to leverage funding from a range of funding pots, but they are quite disparate, as you can see from this slide. Those yellow funding pots there, in yellow text there, tell you that that's what we've got out on street at the moment. Transforming Cities will be transformational. The Government's Transforming Cities Fund, the Getting Building Fund, which is a response to government for shovel-ready schemes, which is funding the St Margaret's bus station, and then a whole range of other funding pots that we have to dip into. This is just a small example of funding pots, and then there are new funding pots coming forward post-Brexit that we're having to look at. There's the levelling up agenda that we're having to look at as well. So we spend a lot of our time, as I'm sure Andrew does in research, more time potentially looking for the funding than actually delivering the project itself, which is always a challenge. But we think we might have the answer to that. If you could move over to the next slide, please. So the answer to that we think might be the workplace parking levy. So instead of having that chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, seeking funding to meet the needs as we've identified them locally, by introducing a workplace parking levy in Leicester, we will be able to ongoing funding to deliver the transformational change and sustain the activity that's needed through a workplace parking levy, where, for those that don't know, parking spaces within the city that are employers' parking spaces will be charged, and that the money that is brought in for that will then be reinvested wholly in sustainable transport initiatives. It's worked in Nottingham. We've worked very closely with Nottingham. Indeed, the people who've delivered the Nottingham scheme are now working with ourselves, and we're also working very closely with the Montfort University. And so what the workplace parking levy we think will do will give us an assurance of regular income that will enable us to stay ahead of the game through those huge challenges we have: those climate emergency challenge, the air quality challenge, the challenge around maintaining ourselves as a local economy that competes in the wider world, and of course we want to reduce congestion and to improve the wider environment too. Next slide, please. So, but what might the workplace parking levy actually fund? And the Metrobus opportunity is one that we feel fits Leicester well. What you can see there are electric tram-style buses that are run in the city of Amiens in northern France. We've looked at the range of opportunities, and yes, we've looked at the fixed tram opportunity, and we're currently looking at the range of opportunities, but we think a metro bus option which simplifies routes and creates a much more strategic network of bus throughout the city in a way that really kind of meets the need of neighbourhoods as well as the city centre, with other interventions as well, such as more cycling interventions, looking at opportunities for electric vehicles, car share, etc. That whole range, but using that kind of mass transit opportunity that Metrobus brings, the kind of electric rapid transit brings, and we think suits a compact city like Leicester in a way that we can deliver at speed and at pace as well. So that's really where we're looking at the moment. Next slide, please. That's it from me. The one thing I didn't talk about really, just to kind of come back to the active travel bit, is the need to run alongside those infrastructure interventions, the behaviour change interventions that are needed as well. So to have training to support people to be confident to use a bike, whether it be in bike share, an e-bike, or their own traditional push bike, but also we need to look at walking infrastructure as well, and to provide people with the confidence and the knowledge that they need to be able to move around the city in the most sustainable way and the healthiest way possible for them, for our economy, and of course for the planet as well. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
That's great. Thanks, Adam. Really appreciate that, and really impressive range of modes of transport you're looking at here, and with a real vision to what that could be like in a zero carbon future for the city. So that's really, really good to hear. I think we've got time for one question before we move on to Jack. So that's come from Ken, and is talking about the I know we've got one more coming, we may have time. So the public ownership of transportation, you've alluded to this kind of limited leverage you have, but how is the situation going to improve, and what can you do about it within the city council?
So I mean that really is in terms of what we can do about it, we're lucky that we have a mayoral system that enables us to move in a more fleet of foot way than other local authorities, and I think that we do need to recognise that there are barriers in terms of legislative barriers to enable us to move at the speed that we want to move at, but we have to offer both carrots and sticks to the private sector in terms of how we work as well, and we have a very good relationship with bus operators, but also a very challenging relationship as well.
Thank you for that. And there's one other question, Tammy, if you could bring it up from Hannah Wakely, which I think is on the same theme.
I've just seen that pop up myself. Yeah, just caught my eye.
So it's very specific around city council powers.
So yes, absolutely. So the Bus Services Act is it was an attempt a few years ago to help to undo some of that 1980s legislation that Robin was talking about, where bus services were kind of were deregulated and powers removed from local authority, and public transport became privately profit motivated transport. So we are using those powers at the moment. We know that franchising is a power that exists within the Act. It's actually incredibly difficult to achieve. I think what we'd rather do is to work with operators. We know that there is the opportunity for franchising there, and the operators also know that we could, if we so wish to, move towards franchising if we were keen to do that. But what we actually have at the minute in Leicester is a bus partnership with the operators. It's an emerging partnership that has been accelerated itself by COVID-19. There's been a lot of work with the operators, particularly around school transport and around supporting operators to continue running services when they're getting much less income through that, and that's helped us to accelerate that partnership. So we do have regular meetings where we do talk through elements that reflect on the powers within the Act, and by building a quality partnership with the operators, that will be our response to the Bus Services Act, and that is emerging at the moment. And the Metro Bus scheme going forward, the opportunities through workplace parking levy, they will all be cognizant of the Act, and we are actually delivering on our response to the Act at the moment. And everything I've talked around bus is enabled by the powers within that Act. It's not a perfect piece of legislation enough.
Thank you. And you've got me thinking with the St Margaret's work. I wonder if you could, when it's zero carbon electric charging points, you could give a deadline to the bus companies, 5 years time, that it's a clean air zone, internal combustion engines not allowed in. And
so we do have a clean air zone. That's one of the things we did do in terms of moving to Euro 6. So we were able to enable, and that was as a response to the legislation as well. It's difficult when you've got a big operators like First and Reeves, who are international companies, and so their local group managers almost have to bid themselves. And I think that the local operators would love to bring in electric buses themselves, and they're bidding within big corporations that have their own responsibilities to their shareholders, etc.
Okay, well, thanks, Adam, for that, and we'll have some time to come back to you at the end. So I should move us along to Jack's contribution. Jack from Ride On, who's behind the new bike share scheme in the city.
Hello.
So we're excited to hear from you, Jack.
Thanks, I'm excited to be here. So yeah, I'm going to give a brief introduction of Ride On, and then try to show some videos and probably fail about how the service works. So let's give it a go. If not, I'll just get some nice pictures up and show some of the features of our bikes. So we are on the verge of our sort of next phase in Leicester. The bikes are on the street. We have a closed group of testers testing out the service. The next phase is to open up the service to essential workers. And then over the coming months, we'll be doing a full public launch, probably aligned with the reduction of restrictions due to coronavirus. So no fixed dates yet, but by the summer, we'll have 500 bikes on the street across 50 stations. What this means for Leicester is that it's the largest docked e-bike scheme in the UK. 100% of the bikes are going to be powered by electric assist. We are experienced in this market. We've got over 10 years of experience in the docked e-bike scheme market. Our founder and a number of our employees launched Europe's first docked e-bike schemes in Spain, and in the sort of high profile scheme is Madrid, which is a huge scheme similar in size to what you'd imagine in London and Paris and other capital cities. As Ride On, our current operations are in Dundee and Miami. So Leicester will be our third scheme branded as Ride On. And yeah, we just can't wait to open it up to the residents of Leicester. The project itself has had a huge amount of thorough details and thinking about how to make it a community-focused scheme. So the City Council have done an amazing job at making social inclusion a key component of our scheme. There'll be a range of significant discounts to low-income groups, to people out of work, to people who wouldn't traditionally use bikes and cycling. And I think that's one of the great things about our system is it's 100% electric, and it breaks down one of the barriers that I'll be going into a bit later, of people getting back into cycling. They often say, "Oh, I'm unfit. I haven't cycled since I was a child." Actually, our bikes are super easy to ride. They can go up really steep gradients with minimal effort. I see them as a really great stepping stone for people to get back onto a bike and back out cycling. Another key demographic for the success of the scheme is, of course, Leicester's 40-odd thousand students. We're working with both universities, DMU and Leicester, to really promote the scheme to the student population. There'll be discounts available for students as well. Our system is sort of industry leading, especially with the security aspect of the scheme. The bikes are all fitted with GPS. In Miami and Dundee so far, we have 100% success rate of retrieving stolen or lost bikes. We have a number of safety features to do with the locking mechanism into the docks, to do with how the bikes were built to be sort of very strong, and also some anti-vandalism components of the docks to really stop people from trying to vandalize this infrastructure, which is for the residents of Leicester to enjoy, and it shouldn't be down to a few groups of people to try and destroy it. So we're confident in our system, and we're looking forward to the people of Leicester really enjoying our product. We also see Leicester as a real research and development hub going forward for our project. We've hired some University of Leicester graduates who have done masters in robotics to be our sort of hardware specialists in Leicester, and the rest of the local team are very, very passionate, keen cyclists who have a huge amount of experience in the bike industry and just have a real passion and love for it, and we hope that sort of shines through in the delivery of our project. So yeah, as I mentioned previously, we've got 3 existing operations with more in the pipeline. We are in Miami with a huge system, which was initially for the local authority and the municipality in Miami, and is now just being opened up to the public. We launched in Dundee the sort of latter part of last year. We've had some really strong feedback from the people of Dundee. We've had over 4,000 rides so far, and the average ride rating has been 4.7 out of 5, which I'm delighted with. And then the bikes went onto the streets of Leicester about 2 weeks ago. We are currently liaising with our volunteers. They're testing out the system, they're testing out the software, they're providing us with feedback, and then we're looking forward to sort of launching with essential workers around the city to help them get to work. So just a few sort of short videos that I'll talk through about our system, really. It's really easy to hire a bike. You can download our app, Ride On UK, on your phone when it's available to the public, that is. You can select Leicester as a city. There'll be a range of membership plans. So you can give it a go for a day, give it a go for a week, give it a go for a month. This is your sort of subscription to the scheme. And then there's a usage fee of anything between sort of 60p for a half an hour trip up to a few pounds if you want to use the service for a longer journey. Obviously, there's a price increase with that. So we really do encourage short, sharp trips. There's docking stations throughout the city. You should never be further away than, say, 200 or 300 meters from a docking station. So if you do want to go to the shop or visit family and friends, just park it in a docking station and then restart your ride. So yeah, the app's really intuitive, easy to use. There's a map where you can see the nearest docking stations. You can see how many bikes are available. You can see how many bikes are available at your destination. You can also reserve a bike up to 15 minutes before departure, so you guarantee to have that bike when you set off. You can also pay by virtual key card, which you'll see in a minute. So if you haven't got access to a smartphone, there's an ability to go up to a kiosk, which will be installed in the summer, to get a physical key card. There's different lights mean different things. So you can see that green lights mean that the bike is available. You go up with either your physical key card or your phone, and you can unlock that bike. And it will make a bit of a beeping noise. When it starts to flash, then you can take the bike out. And off you go. There's a number of ways you can contact us. We've got a live chat feature in the app. You can email, you can phone. We are very responsive. We've got a customer service team who are prepped, ready to help people access the service. If you want to use a wayfaring system like Google Maps, you can use this little phone holder to sort of show you where to go in the city. So that's just a bit of an overview of the system. When you want to get to a dock, it's really easy to close your trip. You simply put the bike into the dock. It will turn blue, and a trip is not complete until the e-bike is docked correctly. So when you see that green light, that's when you know the bike has been secured. It's really important to do that, because if that doesn't happen, the system doesn't register that the trip has ended. You'll then receive a text, and you can go into your account, see all the different rides you made. If you're looking at expensing it for work, you can download receipts similar to Uber and other mobility apps. You can see how busy docks are. You can see how many bikes are available. And if you've pre-booked your bike, it will turn orange, so you'll know that that's your bike to go up to the dock and grab. So I think I have clicked off my slides. So I just need to go back in. Here we go. Okay, so some of the features of our e-bike. Obviously, a lot of people haven't used an electric bike before. They're really easy to use. You don't need to know how to adjust your seat. You can adjust your seat for a range of different heights. So our bikes have indicators, which I think is a really cool feature. I would still use hand directions, but it's just an additional thing to really indicate which direction you're going at to make your journey as safe as possible. There's also brake lights, which I think are a really cool feature. So when you press the brake, the light comes on to signal to other road users that you're slowing down. And then there's just one more video on what's different about an e-bike. So the e-bike, you just turn the power on, and basically, depending on how fast or slow you'd like to go, there's a range of different options. You can pedal maybe 1 or 2 rotations, and then the electric motor kicks in. If you are going up a steep hill, you can decide to turn the power up a bit to give you a bit more power. But really, really simple to use, and you can find the balance. They're sort of limited to about 15 miles an hour in line with UK legislation. So it's just a comfortable ride. It's really great for commuting, actually, because you can go on these bikes for anything up to sort of an hour, and you really won't feel like it's a strenuous exercise. You can just wear your normal clothes. You don't need to wear any special cycling clothes. So yeah, that's about it in terms of my slides, but just a few other things. I think the e-bike share system could be transformational for Leicester in a number of ways. For example, if the workplace parking levy does come in, as Adam has mentioned, if you're an employer and you think maybe it's going to be anywhere between £400-600 per parking space to have a staff car parking space, actually that could fund anything between 7 and 10 memberships to the e-bike scheme. So you can start to see some thinking that maybe employers will do to encourage people to move on away from the car and onto the bike. I think the e-bikes are great at integrating into the wider cycling map that Adam put up earlier, and I think it just breaks down another barrier for people to get back into cycling. One barrier is that they may feel that they're unfit or they haven't rode a bike since childhood. Another barrier you'll hear people say about why they don't cycle is the roads are too dangerous. It's just so dangerous to be a cyclist. The more cycle lanes and cycling infrastructure that we have out there, the more people that are going to get into bikes and back into riding again. So I'm really happy to be delivering Santander Cycles Leicester with Leicester City Council and with Santander with their experience of probably the biggest bike share scheme in Europe, which is the London bike share scheme. So between us, I think we're going to have a really, really great scheme.
Excellent. Thanks, Jack, for that very succinct summary. I think many of the people, including myself listening, are very excited to start using the scheme when it's here. Now, we're running shy of time, so we've had lots of questions about the specific details. I think many of us are kind of really keen to know, and I'll paraphrase a couple of them. One is around where they'll be. So schemes, some schemes like this are in a very small area in cities, which has real downsides about their usefulness. So someone's asking about where the stations are and when we'll know, and how far it will extend out, basically. So could you quickly address that?
Yeah, sure. So the first 50 stations are in about a 10 kilometre squared area around the city centre and the inner suburbs. So they go as far south as, say, the LRI East, as far north as the Dock, and then expand out to some of the inner suburbs. We see this as the sort of the hub of the bike share scheme going forward. It's going to enable people to be within 200-300 meters of every single docking station, and then our plans are to secure funding and to partner with different organizations to start to expand the scheme out along different corridors where the gaps between the docks may be slightly bigger, but cover a much greater radius of population. So inside the city, there'll be a high density of docks, there'll be loads of places to park the bikes, and then there'll be like ladders going out along the cycle paths over the next few years, hopefully, as the scheme gains more funding and continues to grow.
Excellent, thank you. What I'm going to do is bring all the rest of the panel back in now. And there's one more question from Helen. I don't know if we can have that one on the screen. That could be Adam or Jack that picks that one up. Yeah, when will it be launched?
So,
we have to make the launch. I think we're virtually we were good to announce the scheme on March the 23rd, which you'll recall was lockdown day. We had quite an exciting photo shoot planned, which we had to cancel pretty much. We went ahead with a little bit of it, yeah. So we have had to delay the scheme. Obviously, we're keeping an eye out on what's happening in terms of lockdowns. But the docking stations and bikes are out on the street at the moment. They are being used by those who can use them as trials. And we are, Jack will know more about the kind of the preparations for full launch, but we want to launch as soon as it's practically possible. Yeah,
sure. So we are going to be opening the scheme up to essential workers in the coming weeks. And the reason we're opening up to essential workers is to really enable them to be able to get to work, to travel. And then as we grow the scheme over the next few months with more and more docking stations, there'll become a point where we feel there's enough density of docks and it'll be ready to launch for the public. We have a strenuous cleaning regime going on where our rebalancers and our staff are going around cleaning the docks, making the scheme as clean as possible. And there's also going to be an element of personal responsibility that we'll do through the app and through emails to encourage people to clean the bikes before and after use as well. So it'll be a mixture between the two. So our schemes are up and running in Miami and Dundee to the public. And when we have more docks installed over the coming months, we will be launching to the public at a predefined date, in line with hopefully the reduction of lockdown restrictions.
Thank you. Question for Marie, technical one, but of importance if you're riding an e-bike. What's the range of the batteries? Ample, I would assume. But
yeah, comfortably hours of range. But the key thing to say is this scheme is built for short, sharp journeys around the city. There's going to be lots of docking stations. We want the bikes to be used by as many people as possible, 4 or 5 times a day, to be used. And the scheme pricing structure isn't built to cycle to Loughborough and back. It's built to park at a nearby park, walk around the park, cycle back. It's a convenient scheme for trips of between half an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And the pricing structure it sort of matches that. So if someone did use it for a significant period of time, the pricing would seem a bit skewed.
excellent. And a question from Ken about docking stations. We could have that one up.
Yeah. So the docking stations are going into the residential communities all around the inner suburbs, and as we get access to more different grants and funding to have more stations across the city, we'll be looking at residential neighbourhoods across the city in line with the social inclusion sort of key benefits of the scheme. People from low income backgrounds, people who are out of work will get significant discounts to use the scheme, and it will be in neighbourhood areas primarily. The next phases, we've done the city centre, now it's time to expand into some of the other regions of the city.
Good stuff. And just a question for myself that could be for any of you really. And there's been a lot of bike hire schemes in cities all over the world, and Leicester's been quite late to come to this, and that could be quite advantageous because we've had time to think about it. I wonder why this particular model has been chosen, and why would it work well? Maybe Adam or Robin or Jack.
Yeah, I mean, we went through a rigorous tender process, as local authorities have to do. And we went out with a relatively broad opportunity for those interested parties to come forward with creative solutions to the bike share scheme that we were looking to introduce. So we didn't actually go out looking for an e-bike scheme. In fact, at the time there was concern over the Derby e-bike scheme as well, which for all sorts of reasons was pulled. So it wasn't necessary that we wanted an e-bike scheme, but what came forward through the tender process was what was right on, which provided a really compelling argument within budget to deliver an e-bike scheme that that will be fit for purpose, that does have that market leading security aspect to it, and just puts us slightly ahead of the game in terms of those other e-bike schemes that there are nationally as well.
I mean, just to add, certainly, yeah, just in terms of what we see as research, you might have seen this yourself as well, Andrew, as well. I think e-bikes is a game changer, just in terms of that bringing people onto sustainable transport that wouldn't ordinarily do that. And Jack, you've already touched on it, but it's about it opens up a wider commuter market that wouldn't ordinarily use it. It opens up people, in terms of physically wise. It provides access for people that wouldn't ordinarily go on a push bike. So, and all the sort of research you saw, it's about it extends the opportunity that is available.
I think that's really important. It's a gateway bike in a lot of ways as well. People will use this hopefully as their introduction to regular cycling, and they'll continue to use these bike share, but they will also start to ride your standard push bike as well, and it'll help to grow cycling generally across the city. And just seeing people cycling will get other people wanting to cycle, which is really important.
Yeah. And just one thing to add, I suppose, is that a lot of the neighbourhoods that we're serving may not have enough space in their house for their own bike, and I think this scheme should enable huge amount of access to people that may not have enough space or may not have money to buy an e-bike, and it can be that stepping stone into active travel. So yeah, really excited to see it launch fully.
Yeah, Thank you. Yeah, those are all really good valid points, I think, around, removing the barriers to cycling, setting an example, and we're all, I think, very excited to see it as it develops. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're already out of time. This has flown by. So thank you for Jack, Adam and Robin for their contributions. Thank you for Tammy at the Innovation Centre behind the scenes for keeping things running smoothly, and for Sian for convening us as a group for this event. And thank you all for joining and for your questions and contributions during the session. I hope that was interesting, and we look forward to seeing all these sustainable transport initiatives as they develop in the future. So thank you, everybody.
Brilliant. Thanks all.
Cheers.
See you soon. Stay safe.